done everything I know to try and make you mine. And I think I'm gonna love you for a long, long time.
We interrupt this program to bring you...
All right, everybody, my name is Kevin.
My name is Adam.
And I'm Julie.
And we are the Real Movie Guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Real Review, the series where we review and discuss all your favorite movies and TV shows. And once again, we're taking a look at The Last of Us, now episode 3, Long, Long Time. When a stranger approaches his compound, survivalist Bill forges an unlikely connection. Later, Joel and Ellie seek Bill's guidance. Guys, this was a big episode for this show. I think this is probably the largest divergence we've had from the video games. And I have to tell you, I was a little nervous once this episode started because I didn't have any idea where they were going to go. But I am more pleasantly surprised to say this might be the best episode of the show to date. Guys, I was blown away by how good this episode was. Taking something I thought I knew I wanted and made it something else. It's phenomenal. This is probably one of the best episodes of television I've seen in a long time. Adam, where are you at with this? Because I know for someone who loves the game as much as me, it's something, I'm sure.
This was a story that I didn't know that I needed. And it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed the episode.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. And Julie, how about you? For someone who's recently played the game too, I know this was a change for you.
The two of you summed it up perfectly. It's something that you didn't know you wanted or needed, and once you got it, there's no other way to do it. And just an overall fantastic piece of television. It was a beautiful story to be told, and I'm glad that we got to watch it.
So what the heck are we possibly talking about with this episode? Well, the characters of Bill and Frank. For those who don't know, Bill and Frank in The Last of Us, we really don't ever meet Frank in The Last of Us video game. He's kind of an afterthought, and we kind of just hang out with Bill, and we have a little bit of an adventure with him in the video game. The show took a completely different approach to that, and oddly enough, you could really just say this was the Bill and Frank episode, because Joel and Ellie really aren't in the episode, and maybe that was one of my biggest fears going into it, because we'll start from the beginning here, right? So the beginning, we just see Joel and Ellie finally connecting a little bit more than I think that we were used to seeing maybe more in the video game. They're starting to come together just a little bit more, not a lot, but we're starting to see that relationship begin to foster. That was a really good choice. And, I think this is really also making me believe how much Bella Ramsey really is excelling at being Ellie. What did you think of her performance this time, Adam? Because I'm seeing her grow into Ellie a little bit more this episode.
Yeah, I agree. She's definitely coming into the character more and more every single episode. So right now, I think she's definitely on a steady pace to really actually fulfilling that role.
Right, and I thought the banter was really good between them going back and forth. It actually felt very natural, which is kind of hard because we already have an example of them in the video game together, but the show is making these characters seem like they've known each other forever, which I think is exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, it's already seems like, because obviously we have different tones compared to the game, but I think the tone works for the show. Between the two of them, their dynamic, it works.
Right. I think it's a little more. I don't want to say it's a little more colder. I think Joel. I feel like, and at least as far as I can tell, in the show, he's a little bit more colder to Ellie than he was in the game. Would you think that's an accurate observation, or do you think it's about the same?
Yeah, I think it's in different ways. I think he's colder in different ways, it seems.
Yeah. I think a little more, maybe a little more emotionally disconnected, because I felt like he warmed up to her a little faster in the game. But again, they're two different experiences. But
absolutely.
The path the show is taking is very good, because I think we're getting a little more of the darker side of Ellie, which I never felt like we got in the game early on. Julie, what about the scene with the clicker that's in the basement? Ellie goes into the basement. She's like looking for items, and she sees a clicker just lying on the floor covered in rubble, and she starts cutting its head open. Yeah. What do you think that's doing for the story? For me, it feels like it's really adding something different to Ellie's character, something a little more like an intriguing darkness almost in her character, which I never, again, something else I kind of never knew I wanted from her.
Yeah, it was a mix of like darkness and curiosity, I guess. I mean, she's a young girl. She, this is the only world she knows, but also doesn't know that much about it, especially given her condition of being infected, but not. So to have that opportunity to know that she wasn't in any real danger and she could kind of play around with it. I mean, she did end up, I guess, put it out of its misery at the end of the encounter, but it was bizarre to see her like cut it open and see what happened. And even just to sneak away from Joel that way, I thought that was pretty, I mean, it showed, that fearlessness and recklessness on her behalf, which was something that was, we didn't really get to see too much of in the game.
Right. And I think the show's doing a good job too, because we still see how Ellie really doesn't know what's happening in this world, how she is so immature to like everything that's around her as far as like what the infected are. The going joke has been in the show that, oh, I thought you went to school, all this stuff. And she's like, well, it wasn't that great a school. Like she keeps asking him all these questions. And I really like that segue this episode did where, Joel tells her there's a path that he doesn't want her to go on. And she's like, well, why can't we go there? He's like, oh, you wouldn't want to go there. You don't want to go there. I don't want you to see it. That essentially is what he says. And she just goes anyway. And you see a bunch of corpses, right? You see a bunch of skeletons and clothing. And it was just normal people that the government decided to kill because there was no room for them to go. And I thought that was very interesting because we're seeing almost that fatherly connection just start to naturally develop with Joel to where he wants to shield her and protect her. And the show does something at that point, which again, I really didn't expect it to do. It totally just segued right into a backstory, which again, at first it seems like a very strange angle to take with the show because you kind of like introduced your characters and now you're deciding to tell a side story. You would think you would just dedicate the whole episode, but the show didn't want to do that. But it just slides right into the Bill story. And Adam, that for me, again, I'm so impressed with what they did here. What did you think of this portrayal of Bill versus maybe the game's portrayal as far as that character?
Well, I thought that it was obviously very different.
Right.
It seems like there's still some similarities between the two characters, but the Bill that we got in the show seems a little bit more, I guess, set up as what are they called?
Would you say a sympathetic character, as a
Doomsday Prepper?
Doomsday Prepper.
That's it. That's what I was looking for. Yes. Okay. Yeah, because we don't really get that in the game at all. I mean, yeah, it's kind of implied that he's more of a,
he's eccentric that way. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
What does he call himself? He's survivalist.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's
him
it.
Him and Joel are talking. Are you a prepper? I'm a survivalist.
It's like they took the this character from the game who was very, I guess, straightforward. We knew what he was and gave him depth in the show, and I like that a lot.
Right, and I think it's really good because I like how it's interesting that they're telling, because they interviewed Neil Druckmann at the end of the episode and he talks about the change and why they decided to make it. And what he essentially said was, with the other co-writer and co-creator of the series, said they wanted to show another form of love, right, Julie? That was like the whole idea of changing the story.
Yeah, I think they said, the overarching theme of the whole game is love. The main focus being, Joel's love for Sarah, his daughter, and then his love for Ellie. But then eventually we'll have other stories too, sibling love and other, examples of it there. Even in the game with Bill and Frank, there is love. It's a different kind of love that happens in the game. But this was, I think, a really beautiful story. And I think he even said too, when they were talking about changing it, they said, let's see what we come up with, but if we don't like it, then we'll stick to the game. If it's not better,
right,
then we'll stick to what we had. And he goes, it was beyond anything we could have imagined.
And I like that approach. I think hearing that approach makes me really happy inside when someone says, I'm not going to just change it just to change it. If you can make it better and you can prove that to me why it's better, then absolutely I'm game for it. And that was the perfect example for this. This pretty much whole episode, I want to say, except for the book and beginning and ending of the Joel and Ellie segments, is all about Bill and Frank. And you literally see them. You see when Bill becomes first alone at the beginning of everything, right up until the very end with Bill and Frank and what ultimately happens to them. And the interesting part is, except for one minor, interaction that we actually see, Joel really doesn't interact that much with this character for someone that's plays such a pivotal role in the scene. I thought that was a very brave take to do, right? You're relying just on their story to carry this episode and to leave an impression. And Adam, I think it did in a lot of ways. Wouldn't you agree? I was so impressed by it.
Yeah, it hit so many emotional beats. It was just crazy how much they could pack into that hour episode.
Right, and it felt natural. Like the passage of time never felt boring to me. It moved briskly, but gave you just the right beats of information about how Bill is this prepper. He's all prepper, survivalist, whatever you want to call him. He's all alone setting up the town. He meets Frank by chance, who just happens to be there. They form a connection together almost immediately. There's a little spark there between the two of them understanding. Right then, there's another jump, and they're fighting over what love means, what love means to Frank by taking care of this little town that they have. And then they invite other guests in. That's when we meet Joel and Tess. They come over for an awkward dinner that they have together as people that they happen to find. Suddenly, they're being raided by raiders because Joel told Bill that was going to happen at some point. And then eventually, we start to see Frank's in poor health, and at this point it's 20 some odd years that they've been together within that span of almost not even an hour worth of episode maybe that we saw this time. And you're telling me you made me care about this character, those two characters. If you told me they were the main characters of this story, I think I would have believed you. It really felt that good, and anything else that was happening in the world felt I didn't really care about. And I think that's really impressive to me that you can do that. For me, not to really care about Joel and Ellie for a hot minute, I'm more worried about Bill and Frank right now. What's going to happen to them? And when we get to the end, and it took me by surprise that they were going to do that. I thought, by all accounts, and I guess this is where we're going to get into a little bit of spoilers here, Frank is ill, and Bill, gives him the best last day of his life. And, they have a beautiful exchange, in my opinion. And Bill decides he's lived his life with Frank. That's all he wanted. What's the point of me living? And they decide almost to have a suicide pact together and die. And it's a beautiful scene because you see Ellie and Joel are the ones that discover him, and Ellie finds the suicide note and she reads it to Joel. And that was a powerful scene, guys. I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna say I teared up, but if I had more of a soul, I think I would have, because I was pretty close to it, to be honest. It really touched a couple nerves for me.
I was getting emotional with you just recapping it again.
And what did you think of that, Adam? Because I think that's going to be a big contention for a lot of people if we're going to make that real game to show comparison. Do you think this was more impactful than what was presented in the game as far as that letter?
Yes, I do, because I think the main objective of the show is to expand on the Last of Us universe, tell stories that the game didn't necessarily get to tell.
Right.
And, give them more of a presence, give these characters more depth, if you will. And I think that this definitely hit the mark.
And I have to say it did. In a lot more ways, because I would say in the game it's a lot more of a negative situation. Frank in the game version of this story leaves Bill because he wants to leave the town. He's sick of staying there. He wants to leave. And what happens is Frank gets bitten by a zombie or whatever, and he kills himself because he knows he's going to die, and he leaves this terrible note to Bill and tells him how much he hated him, and it's all because of you. All this happened, and he gives it. He's about to. Joel finds it. You find it in the game by yourself, and then you're about to give it to Bill, but Bill decides not to read it. He's like, I'm not going to read it or whatever like that, and it leaves this very depressing, very presence over the whole story. And I guess that's maybe the tones that we're getting, two different things. Adam, do you agree with that too, that we're getting two different tones as far as storytelling? Because if anything, I think the show version of The Last of Us is a little more optimistic, I think, than the video game so far. I think things are starting to look more promising for the future.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It shows that, even in these dark times, you can still find happiness. And it's funny because in the game, Bill is he really is just out for himself at that point. In the game, he even warns Joel, having somebody, that you worry about is going to get yourself killed.
Right.
Because he's been there before.
Yeah.
So but this is the total opposite of
right. And if anything,
that Bill is.
And like I said kind of before, I think the juxtaposition of that story made Joel and Ellie's story that much stronger, because he is kind of giving Joel the courage to move forward with Ellie, and maybe to say, hey, if there is someone special, and you can find someone special again, because Joel at this point, he's lost Tess, and that was something that the game never reflected on, which kind of always bothered me. Like, Joel and Tess were together. Like, I was always assumed that they had some kind of relationship, and when she dies in the game, it's kind of just thrown away and never really heard about or talked about again. The show at least is trying to make amends with that, I think, a little bit, and he couldn't protect two women in his lives already. He lost his daughter, he lost, a lover, and now he has an opportunity to be with another young girl, to take care of and maybe form some kind of relationship with, where he needs to look out for her. And this is a new kind of love that can happen for Joel on not a romantic level, obviously, but as that father-daughter relationship. And by, Bill leaving that letter for Joel, it's kind of invigorating the hope in him. And what did you think of that, Julie? Because I just think it perfectly mirrors the situation here.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a more optimistic take overall. And even some of the stuff you and Adam were both bringing up, like, Bill just kind of being like, oh, well, you don't worry. Don't bring other people in the game. Don't bring other people into your life because it's another thing to worry about. But in the show, he tells Frank, I wasn't afraid until you came along, because he knew there were stakes now. There was someone he cared about and someone he was afraid of losing. Or even... I can't remember my other point that I was going to make. Even with like the death and Frank's suicide in the game with the I hate you, him and Bill did have arguments to that level, but Frank ended up saying, did I have bad days? I had a lot of bad days. Some of them were even with you, but I had a lot more good days. So again, it's focusing on that glass half full instead of, all hope is gone. You can find someone else to take care of and to find purpose in life.
Yeah, and I think so. I really think it just is such a beautifully composed episode. Nick Offerman, who's usually known for his comedic roles, he was a little funny in this, of course, but the seriousness of his performance, along with Murray Bartlett, who's also from White Lotus recently. I know Julie and I had seen him in that. The two of their chemistry together, it blew me away, actually, that they had that much chemistry and were able to convince this story. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some kind of awards for this. If people are thinking about these characters in this episode, there's going to be something for them, because those performances, I think, are really what sold it for me. And again, just the way Neil Druckmann, if this is his idea of going back and saying, I want to make my story better. And that's always a scary process. We've seen authors do that, like J.K. Rowling, she who must not be named, unfortunately. She's gone back and made changes saying, oh, I made my story a little bit better by making this character a certain way or doing this. It didn't really do that. But if you ask me, as far as this episode, they made The Last of Us that much better, in my opinion. And, maybe at this point they're going to be two different things, because I know, Adam, you're seeing some breadcrumbs, I'm sure, of things that are to come. Definitely in this episode, there was a couple references of things that, scenes I was hoping would have happened already, but haven't yet, which I think we're leading up to, especially that Joel and Ellie relationship. They decided to shuffle a couple things around, but I think it's for the better almost, right? I do think it's going to maybe work out more in its favor in this way.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued as to how this show is going to go. It's very interesting to me, because at this point, anything goes.
Right, and I love how people, and it seems to be like the typical internet recourse where, oh, you changed the thing I love and you did something completely different with it. If you make it better, that's not a bad thing, guys. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what else to say to those people out there that are all upset about Bill not being the way he was. It's okay to love a character the way he was portrayed. Like, we're not going to get those Bill and Ellie confrontations that we had in the game, which everyone loves, and they are funny. They are fantastic. But I'll take this over that. I'm sorry. Like, this means more to me and more to the story, especially for this form of storytelling. I think is going to be much appreciated a lot longer, maybe more so than the game's form of storytelling in that way. But this episode, guys, this is one that's going to go down. I think I'm going to remember for a long time, even if the rest of the show sucked, to be honest with you. Just that mini story that was told in here, how well executed it was. It's going to stick with me. which I think brings us to our final scores. I'm going to give The Last of Us Episode 3, Long, Long Time, a 10 out of 10.
Look, first, my name's Frank.
Oh, yeah? Here's the thing, Frank. If I feed you, then every bum you talk to about it is going to show up here looking for a free lunch. And this is not an Arby's.
Well, Arby's didn't have free lunch. It was a restaurant.
This was the best episode of The Last of Us by far. It took a story I already knew, made it that much better. It's a perfect tale of storytelling, bookended by some great performances, sandwiched with even better performances in this show. I didn't know this was going to happen. I never could have told you that the character of Bill and Frank would be like my two favorite characters from this universe, and it happened to do that, and I cannot wait to see where they go. I hope it can only get better from here, but if for some reason it didn't, again, I'm going to remember this episode for quite a long time. Adam, where do you stand with this episode?
See, I like to judge my shows and movies on whether or not I'd go back and rewatch them. And I would 100%, even if I just went and watched this episode by itself, I would watch it again. So I will as well give it a 10 out of 10.
Let's go inside. Tess, I want to show you something.
Actually, I have been wanting to see.
Not inside.
Thank you. Yes.
Frank! Frank!
Songs.
It just resonated so well.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's really going to forget it. Again, if I were even just to show people this episode, I think you could just watch this almost self-contained and really just get something out of it, because it really is that well crafted. Julie, you're the last one. What are you thinking?
I'm going to give The Last of Us Episode 3 a 10 out of 10.
So I'm going to tell you something, because you're probably the only person who will understand. I used to hate the world, and I was happy when everyone died. But I was wrong, because there was one person worth saving. That's what I did. I saved him. Then I protected him. That's why men like you and me are here. We have a job to do. And God help any motherfuckers who stand in our way.
Overall, perfect episode, fantastic performances. Rewatchability is there. It really is a time capsule of the Last of Us universe. This perfect little story of these two men surviving the end of the world and finding each other, and it was beautiful.
It was, and again, it also forwarded the main story as well, which is what you want to see. You know, it could have been stagnant if they had maybe gone about it a different way. But the show that's impeccable writing, in my opinion. Well directed, well shot. It's just a perfect episode of TV, guys. We have a lot more to come. I cannot wait to see where The Last of Us goes. Again, if this is any indication, I think we're in good hands now. You know, usually I give a show about 3 episodes. The first 3 episodes have been fantastic so far, but this was definitely the one. If the past 2 didn't hook you, I think this is really going to give people a reason to come back. You know, again, the characters may no longer be around that were in this episode, but the story that it's pushing forward, I think is going to be even better than just this story. So again, I can't wait to see what comes next. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin. That's Adam. That's Julie. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
If you guys like what you've seen here today, consider giving this video a like and leaving your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay up to date with everything Real Movie Guys related, make sure to hit that subscribe button and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget, all you audio listeners at home, we are available on many podcasting platforms. Just search The Real Movie Guys, you should pop right up. Thank you again all so much for joining us on this episode of The Real Review. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Catch you next time.